there was a film came out earlier this year called Hunger Games. And this encapsulated in so many ways the society where the global warming bollocks is supposed to take us through justification. Of course, if you look at the symbol of the film, it's the phoenix, the firebird. For those who haven't seen it, it was a world sometime in the future of enormous, total control, where different sectors were fenced off and people were not allowed to go in most of the land of the country. And they were controlled from something called the Capitol, which was an elite that was served by all the poor people and hungry people around the country. They had games every year where 2 young people were picked from each sector who had to fight on live television, and the one who won was the one that stayed alive after all the others were killed. The idea was to kill all the others and win the game. As Dr. Richard Day said in 1969, violence, pornography, and obscenity in the media and movies will be increased to desensitize people to violence and porn and make them feel life is short, precarious, and brutish. And the Hunger Games was a classic, but it was more than that. It was a symbol of the society that we're heading towards so fast. This was one of the elite in the Capitol, the equivalent of what people call the 1%, although, as I say, the real control is in far fewer than that. And we have a version of the Hunger Games, and it's called Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and it is being orchestrated outside or through the United Nations, and it is a stalking horse, a Trojan horse for world fascism.
I'm Rosa Corey, and I'm from the United States, California. And my topic, what I speak about, is one of the most vitally important issues of our age, and that is United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. And as I'll be talking about tomorrow, it is the inventory and control plan. Inventory and control of all land, all water, all minerals, all plants, all animals, all construction, all means of production, all food, all energy, all information, and all human beings in the world. And this is a plan that was agreed to by 179 nations back in 1992. It's a United Nations plan. It's called the Agenda for the 21st Century. And so many of us around the world think that, sustainable development, it just sounds so great. Isn't it about recycling and creative reuse and creating energy and food resources for everyone? And the answer is no, it really is not. It's about moving populations into city centers, concentrated city centers, and clearing them out of the rural areas.
How are these people actually getting away with this without the American public screaming in protest?
This has been happening over time. It originated in the United Nations under a document called Agenda 21 for the 21st century, and these turned into executive orders by the president, which are very powerful methods. They really are dictating. They bypass Congress. They are only accountable to the judicial branch and the legislative branch. But when the president appoints the judges and nominates the legislators, and if they are in favor of his ideologies, well, you can see the system of checks and balances is watered down greatly. So this is very powerful. Now, and how can they implement it without our knowing it? They don't want us to know it.
I first stumbled across Agenda 21 in about 2008, and quite frankly, my first reaction was to dismiss what I was reading, because I didn't believe that any government in Australia would take us down this road. Then I began to see a legislative pattern emerging in Parliament which concerned me greatly, and I also started to see the tenor of legislation that we were passing. I did air those concerns in Parliament, and it was dismissed and ignored. The words Agenda 21, ladies and gentlemen, were never meant to be spoken.
In order to dictate and regulate what it is that happens around the world. And we as individuals have literally no influence on that unless we are in agreement with it. If you dissent against the community, against communitarian law or against communitarian social tactics, you're rejected and basically made an outcast. And that is something that we wanted to expose to the world. And the reason that we created the Post-Sustainability Institute was in order to sue. We sued our local government, and right now we're suing higher up in order to stop regional plans, because regionalization is the stepping stone to globalization. And globalization is the standardization of all systems. So that includes water, law enforcement, education, energy. All systems have to be brought into harmony in order to control them all. Because when systems don't meet, when they're out of balance or not in sync with one another, they can't be controlled centrally. And the goal of Agenda 21 is one world government and total control from a central unit. And the principles are public-private partnerships, which is fascism. And this is how it's implemented on the ground, is through this joining together between corporations, non-governmental organizations, and governments in order to cut out the actual individual, your voter, and instead to take that to a level where we literally cannot penetrate.
They want a world of regions, because if you're going to have total control of people in the Orwellian police state way that they want, this is why things like the Hunger Games, they have sectors which are fenced off from the other sectors. Is you need to do it right into the local level if you want total control. And this is why you're seeing this movement of the police state going into communities at a lower and lower level. So one area of this structure that they want is breaking countries up into regions. And this is one of the maps for how they intend to break up European Union, into regions. And what they have planned is that regions of one country are connected into regions in another, therefore destroying national sovereignty and national unity, because they want an end to sovereignty. They want an end to all of it. They just want technocrats, bureaucrats, and uniform impositions of the decisions made by those people, and no democratic things at all. Now, this is something called America 2050. This is all connected into the agenda for Agenda 21, and they have broken up America into a series of mega regions in which they will have mega cities, what they call human centers.
I'm going to take a few minutes to tell you about my meeting. I went to the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. I was shocked, to say the least. They gave another presentation on 750, and this clown got up, and here's some of the statements that we withdrew from this, and it's a darn good thing we did. This group is a bunch of radicals. Here's one of the statements. Cities are less important. In other words, they will become less important. The worldview, counties will become less important also. Only mega regions are important. Now, he's starting to talk about European trade, et cetera, so only mega regions, in other words, the entire 7 counties would have someone to control them. They are not going to put up with American education system. He's talking about the Europeans. It was about this time when I started getting a little upset, and I had a few words, but I don't know what world this guy is living in. I mean, what rock they turned over to find this guy. Don't be distracted by today's problems. I mean, and here's one, I almost got up and left. Fascism is the best form of government to implement these changes. We will be transcending local contact and local control. create a utopian community. Now, where have you heard that from back in the 60s? A very small group of people to make the decisions. In other words, we, the cities, the municipalities, and the counties wouldn't be making the decisions. The group down in Miami, the 750 group, and he said no more than 4 people. Capitalism is ruthless. Well, duh, where'd you grow up? I thought the Gestapo was going to walk into the room. I mean, this guy is an arrogant, pompous ass. Don't ever have anything to do with the 750. We made the right decision. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
750 is a non-governmental organization that consists of over 200 unelected bureaucrats in our 7 Florida counties. They are government appointees from outside our area who circumvent the state level, infiltrate local city councils, planning and zoning boards, and the boards of county commissioners. Then they bypass those organizations in order to implement the 750 Community Reengineering Plan. Working under Presidential Executive Order Number 13575, called the Presidential Council on Sustainable Development, 750's been assigned to nationalize human settlements into a one-size-fits-all model and federalize our living spaces. They hope, without our knowledge, without our vote, without our consent, but with our tax dollars.
Is the bigger plan behind 750?
Well, 750 is just part of a very, very big plan called Agenda 21. Now, Agenda 21 was conceived in the early 1990s. It was created and defined by the United Nations in 1987, and the action plan to implement it was signed in 1992 by U.S. President Bush, and 178 other nations signed on as well.
And then we have the discussion about ICLEI. As is noted in the staff report, ICLEI was founded in 1999 at a meeting of 200 cities and counties at the United Nations building. They now have a Congress that meets every 3 years, and subsequent meetings have been at other locations, typically ICLEI members in countries around the world. I think they are not a governmental entity, and they have no authority or power over any city or county in the state or the nation for that matter. They have over 500 members in the United States and over 1,200 members worldwide. The city's membership in ICLEI, which costs $600 a year, was approved by the City Council in 1997. As part of our effort to do the initial greenhouse gas inventory for the city government. They also provided Excel templates and best practices during the preparation of the city's climate action plan, and they have also been involved in a number of other projects. Most recently, they're working with 511.org on surveys for cities and private businesses to encourage car sharing and carpooling. We also heard some discussion about so-called Agenda 21 in the United Nations. It was an interesting discussion because prior to August, the city had never heard of either Agenda 21 or the process that it went through. We were urged to look into it and what the federal government was doing, so we did.
Are you aware of any language in Agenda 21's stated goals as to the intention to eliminate property rights or redistribute wealth in the United States?
I don't recall seeing that, although I do know that there is some language in that action plan desiring to reduce poverty. There's some discussion about that.
Brian, do you know where the term sustainable development came from?
I don't know.
Okay.
This is Agenda 21. This is the United Nations plan. It's a 300-page, 40-chapter plan. And ICLEI was created in 1990 prior to this plan's adoption to implement United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development worldwide. Sustainable development is a term that was defined by the United Nations.
They said that Agenda 21 is not part of ICLEI. I have parts of Agenda 21 and ICLEI here, and this is from the ICLEI website. It says over 10,000 communities worldwide have engaged in local Agenda 21, a participatory planning process developed by ICLEI.
What they're going for is 11 regions in North America, not states, not our 50 states, 11 regions. They will be appointing people to do the planning and the running and the operation of those regions through the United Nations.
This is all about U.S. private property rights. We have a right to private property and electional property, but the UN does not believe we can have property. They believe private land ownership is the way to injustice, that poor people can't have private property, so therefore it's not fair.
I have recently become aware that San Carlos has membership in ICLE. ICLE arose from a United Nations sponsored program titled Agenda 21. Answer, incorrect. ICLE was founded in 1990. You heard the answers. You heard other people point it out. That's a bald-faced lie in our staff report.
Agenda 21 is about controlling every aspect of our lives. How we eat, what we eat, how much we eat, how we move around, food production, the amount of food, and where we even live.
And they use these government grants to rezone your downtown areas and narrow the streets and pedestrianize them. And eventually, the use of automobiles will not be allowed here. Over time, they tax private property owners in the extreme. This is called a tax sharing basis. They tax the suburbs to pay for this inner city until eventually private homes with their individually controlled air conditioners and irrigated lawns are no longer sustainable, and automobiles with their dirty carbon footprints are no longer sustainable under the new EPA regularization. So over time, they phase out private property and your right to own an automobile.
It's a corporatocracy. It's a totalitarian state being developed right now all over the world. And what major corporations want in this fascist development is to be able to have full movement of workers without borders or boundaries, to be able to move their goods through without regulations, and to reduce wages. And so this is the goal.
In 1992, former President of the United States, George Bush Sr. said, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action will be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level.
This is the wish list in documents for Agenda 21 operating through the United Nations. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. An end to national sovereignty. State planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water. Agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity equals slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit, children to be raised by the state, people told, this is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, I'll get to them in a minute, mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live for reasons I'm coming to, dumbing down education, achieved a long time ago, mass global depopulation in pursuit of all of the above. Agenda 21 was agreed at the 1992 Earth Summit in Brazil, which was headed by this guy, Maurice Strong, one of the gang big time, a mate of Al Gore, and he said, Maurice Strong, this billionaire oil man, etc., he said, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about?
In 1992, Maurice Strong, Secretary General of the UN Earth Summit and member of the Club of Rome, said, it is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, ownership of motor vehicles, small electrical appliances, home and workplace air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable.
Now, Maurice Strong, who was the Secretary General on the Earth Summit Conference, stated, current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class involving high meat intake, use of fossil fuels and appliances, home and work air conditioning, and suburban housing are not sustainable. He further stated, which is totally atrocious, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilization collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? Could you imagine what this would do to our lifestyle?